Hello and welcome to another episode of The Legend of Nobunaga. In this week's episode, it looks like we're going to be facing the battle for Kyoto. We're against the Ashikaga army, the army belonging to the Ashikaga shogunate. So this is Ashikaga Yoshiaki, the crazy former shogun who we've been seeing trying to bring us down for quite a while now. Basically ever since about 1570, which is 3 years ago in the current chronology of the game. Yoshiaki has been trying to conspire against Nobunaga for various reasons.
He must be defeated if we are to end the chaos. Begin your preparations. Sir!
You might remember that Yoshiaki had actually been saved by Nobunaga before 1570. Yoshiaki had been ousted from power, but Nobunaga restored him. So you might wonder why Yoshiaki is plotting against him. And I'll tell you why in a moment. Let's see what's going on here. Looks like Tatsuoki Saito is up to no good.
I have killed over 1,000 people who had sided with the traitorous Oda.
I see.
You must not continue that. You will lose the support of the people for the shogunate.
Huh? Have you lost your nerve, huh? Huh? Maybe you're in league with Nobunaga!
Your lordship, Matsunaga has joined Oda. Takeda has retreated to Kai. What chance do we have of defeating Oda?
Don't worry. This plan is foolproof. Don't worry.
I'm sure it is foolproof. So I'm not sure Tatsuoki really did do any slaughtering of Oda loyalists.
The time's come for him to pay for his crimes.
My lord, we must be careful. Who knows what will happen if we remove the Shogun? What if we find someone of his blood and create a new Shogun to take his place?
No. The Shogunate is a nest for corrupt people who desire power. They are a large part of the chaos and must be stopped.
Mitsuhide, you have no feelings at all about attacking his lordship?
It is for the land and people.
Awkward silence.
Lord Mitsuhide.
Yes. You're absolutely right. For the land and the people. I am ashamed for my hesitation in the matter.
Master Mitsuhide, I see that you truly are for the people. I applaud you.
People do not change this much. Where's the delicate youth I used to know?
So Mitsuhide is strangely enthusiastic to remove Yoshiaki. Remember, of course, that Mitsuhide is a servant of Yoshiaki, technically. We've seen in other cutscenes, and historically, he did serve Yoshiaki a few years back.
Let's start.
According to our scouts, this is the current situation.
So let's have a look at what sort of level we're going to have to do. We'll be able to see whether it corresponds to anything happening historically at the time.
We shall win by defeating the enemy commander, Yoshiaki Ashikaga. His lordship is positioned in this area.
So we've got to get through this blocky city to Yoshiaki up at the top right.
I never expected his lordship to attack us. He must be planning something.
So yeah, he's up to something. He's got some sort of plan up his sleeve, so we'll find out what that is.
There is no reason to hesitate or fear them. The Shogunate must be destroyed before a new world can be created.
My lord, how do you wish us to deploy?
Fair enough, Mitsuhide. Yes, he does seem strangely enthusiastic. So, I'm forced to deploy one squad at the bottom left-hand corner of the city, and another squad up at the top left-hand corner, and we can see enemy units all over the city already, so we're going to have to try and be careful not to get too surrounded in these streets. I decided to place down a squad of cavalry to support Nobunaga, and at the top I'm going to put down a squad of infantry using Toshie to command as usual, and I'm going to add in Koroku and one of the new characters I got in the last episode, Yoki Kessen, who's quite cool. He has an interesting voice, a little bit different from the other guys. Decided to switch in Hideyoshi instead of Katsuie just for the lols. We also saw that there's a strange battery of cannons in the middle of the city, so I'm guessing I'm going to have to do something about that. I think that's fairly non-historical. I mean, cannons were definitely existed at the time, and they must have had access to them through foreign trade, but generally in Japan, cannons, especially mobile cannons, weren't used at all in combat. I can't remember exactly why, but it may have been due to bans on wheeled vehicles.
We will destroy
You can't really move cannons without wheeled vehicles.
Our
May have been
council
something
is
like
over. Blow the horns. We ride to war soon.
that. But never mind, let's have a look at the level itself. I should warn you in advance that this footage is going to be laggy.
The days of the shogunate are numbered. Let's go!
My game engine doesn't like rendering all the buildings in the town, so it lags up. And towards the end my computer started updating, which didn't help either.
Strong.
Anyway, so I start moving forward and the enemy units start falling back. So, I don't know, I guess they weren't expecting to be attacked or something, which would be historically accurate. And on that note, I guess I'll quickly tell the vague story of the events that I think this level is trying to portray. So I said that Yoshiaki had been plotting against Nobunaga, and why has he been doing that? It's because since about 1570, Nobunaga has been seriously damping Yoshiaki's power. Technically, Yoshiaki is the shogun, ruler of all Japan, but Nobunaga is acting as if he was the shogun, and he has put regulations in place to severely dampen Yoshiaki's power and turn him into Nobunaga's puppet, basically. Yoshiaki isn't happy about this, and he's been scheming with all the other daimyo in the land to try and take Nobunaga down. So we saw last time we were facing off against the Takeda army, and in theory that Takeda army was only attacking at the behest of Yoshiaki. Possibly not true, but the idea is there.
I'm begging you. I'll give you this.
We can see here in the level,
Spare my
I encountered this
life.
enemy unit which just doesn't act, and they try and give me an item in exchange for not killing them. But I guess I decided to kill them anyway, so that's quite mean of me, to be honest. Anyway, you'll see throughout this section that the enemy units seem to be acting out of cohesion. I managed to avoid all those cannons by coming in at an angle. But there's definitely something was going on. At first I thought the game was glitched, but it turns out I think it's scripted events that a lot of the enemy units just kind of disappear or commit suicide because they're so confused at your attack. So this first stage of the level is pretty simple actually. You don't really have to do very much. Anyway, so Yoshiaki is in trouble now because Takeda has been defeated. So now there isn't very much stopping Nobunaga from focusing all his intention on capturing Kyoto back off Yoshiaki, who has been... I guess Nobunaga technically controls Kyoto, but Yoshiaki controls all of the military forces there, so he has proper control over Kyoto. And Nobunaga wants it back. Nobunaga knows that Yoshiaki has taken a stand against him, and he'd been intending to do something about it for a while, but he'd been held back by the fact that Azai, Asakura and Takeda armies could attack him at any time. But now the Takeda army's out of the question, he feels a little bit more confident. So right after defeating Takeda at the siege of Noda Castle, which we talked about last time, well, I say defeating, after Takeda army retreated in the face of Nobunaga's army, he marched west towards Kyoto. And Yoshiaki wasn't really expecting this to happen. His forces weren't prepared when Nobunaga arrived, which I guess is represented by all the crazy goings on here in the level of the troops getting worried as I approached them, or just killing themselves or something. Nobunaga basically just laid siege to Kyoto, and it looked like Nobunaga would win, but the Emperor gets involved, as he has in many of Nobunaga's conflicts, and negotiates peace. So you can see it's a very strange event happening here. Two enemy units kind of flying all over the screen and losing their health. Not really sure what was going on. Anyway, the Emperor negotiates peace between Nobunaga and Yoshiaki right after the siege begins. So actually there was no battle at all. So this battle is technically historically inaccurate, but oh well. They negotiate peace. And what happens is Nobunaga, confident for at least a while in this peace, although he knows really it's not going to last very long. He's confident enough to leave, so he takes his army away from Kyoto and faces some rebels, some Iko, at Nagashima, which is a place on the western border of Owari. It's a part of a large group of religious monks who had been fighting against Nobunaga's forces all across the region. And this particular castle Nobunaga was worried about. It's very near to his home province and controlled a very strong defensive position. So he tried to go and deal with it. And he decided to go with a mainly firearm-based force. And this turned out to be a tragic mistake, because although Nobunaga would later be famous for his use of firearm tactics, in this particular case there was very heavy rain on the day of his engagement, and this caused a lot of his firearms to become ineffective, because at this time in the early period of firearms tactics, rain would basically render them inoperable. So a large proportion of his firearms ceased to work. Meanwhile, the Eco, who also had a lot of firearms themselves, had been protecting their firearms from the rain inside their fortifications, and now were able to march out and have a distinct ranged advantage against Nobunaga's forces. Nobunaga still tried to engage them even with his few remaining operating weapons and in hand-to-hand, but he was very rapidly defeated and almost died himself in the combat, but he managed to retreat. And basically it was a crushing blow for Nobunaga, one of his many defeats, which isn't really portrayed here in the Legend of Nobunaga, but I'd like to tell you they happened anyway. There was a fair few of them. So in this case, Nobunaga was defeated, and Yoshiaki, seeing this defeat, became confident enough to rebel again against the forces of Nobunaga. He started another rebellion back at Kyoto. This time he took the battle outside of the city. He holed himself up in a fort beside a river just outside the city. And you could see, you could vaguely interpret here in the stage that there's a river going through the middle, and Yoshiaki's forces are in a fort up at the top right. So I mean, there's kind of a link there between what happened historically and what we're seeing in the stage. So I don't know. I like to think that the game at least tried to be somewhat historically accurate. I mean, all of the character names and forces that appear in the levels are accurate, so they obviously researched these things. So it must have influenced their decisions at least a little bit. But anyway, Yoshiaki holed up in this fort and Nobunaga moved to attack. Yoshiaki was hoping that either the Azai or Asakura forces or perhaps some other religious monks would come and basically relieve him. He was planning to create a long fought out siege battle. But unfortunately for him, Nobunaga's attack was far too powerful. He broke through the fortifications Yoshiaki had prepared, and Yoshiaki was forced to surrender. And we'll see a little bit later in the stage that something vaguely related to that is going to happen here in the level. That was basically the end of the story of Yoshiaki, because after surrendering to Nobunaga at the end of that second battle, he was sent into exile by Nobunaga. Nobunaga could have executed him, but he decided to be merciful after Yoshiaki begged for forgiveness. You can see Tatsuki Saito shows up in the bottom left hand corner as reinforcements. I guess this was all part of Yoshiaki's crazy plan. But they're not going to be too much trouble because they're a very long way from my actual units, so I'm going to have some time to prepare to receive them. There's Yoki Kaisen with his fairly laid back voice. I quite like it. Anyway, yes, Yoshiaki sent into exile around this time, and Nobunaga becomes the de facto shogun. He doesn't take the title of shogun, and I don't think, no, he never does actually, even though he's basically acting as shogun for the rest of his life from now on. He just takes the duties. But we'll see some of that after this battle. I think the game's going to talk about a little bit about the aftermath of the vague events around Kyoto. I guess we just have to imagine that this stage, the Battle for Kyoto, is representing the 6-month or so period in which Nobunaga engaged twice at Kyoto, only fighting a battle on the second time and losing a major war in between, and which Yoshiaki was sent to exile. Tatsuki Saito finally shows up with my main unit from behind. I peel off Hideyoshi Hashiba to try and deal with them, but the combined strength of the two enemy units is a bit too much to take, and Hideyoshi starts to break. You can see his formation falling apart. I decide to use an offensive skill to knock the enemy back, to try and help some of my men at the back. The free skill is very useful because it attacks multiple enemy units if they are stuck together. It hits them both and confuses them for a few seconds. That confusion will give me the time to charge up a charge attack, just like that, and now I can rampage through. So I really need to finish off these guys over here so I can bring Kicho Nobunaga over to help Hideyoshi. And it looks like that's going to be happening in a few seconds. So while that happens, there's another thing I want to talk about, which is really related to something that's going to happen after this level. In one of the cutscenes after this level, we're going to see the game claim that Nobunaga made loads of civil politics advances during this time. After he took control of Kyoto, he sort of did lots of economic work on building up the region, improving the lives of the people in general. And I'd just like to note that that is in general true. Throughout his campaign, Nobunaga has been implementing various economic policies which were in the long term very beneficial to the lower classes of Japan. Basically, Nobunaga's plan was to build an economics powerhouse on which he was going to base his empire. At the time, the economy of Japan was very slow and was dominated by guilds, who basically had monopolies on the few industries that there were. And it was very hard for people to get into these guilds. One of the big things that Nobunaga did was remove the restrictions on entry to the guilds so that they could expand and more people could get involved. He also made it illegal for the guilds to have monopolies, forcing multiple guilds to take over certain sectors of the economy.
Also suffering. Remain strong.
In Kyoto specifically, he implemented a few reforms. One reform was creating an administrative legal system. That was something he did specifically around 1572, I believe, so the time that this battle is supposed to be taking place. He creates this legal system because it's slightly improving on the usual semi-arbitrary legal system. I think I talked about this in the last episode of Legend of Nobunaga as well, because Takeda Shingen was doing a similar thing. Nobunaga's civil policies were kind of similar to Takeda Shingen's, but Takeda Shingen's policies were very level in that they treated everyone of all classes equally, whereas Nobunaga's policies actually favoured the lower classes. He gave them tax breaks and had the, I guess what you might call the very of low beginnings of a social security system, whereby he would allow people on extremely low incomes to not pay taxes and to have free food given to them. Not a very revolutionary policy, since even ancient Rome had policies like that. But something new for Japan, something they probably benefited from a fair bit. We can see here in the level I've managed to capture the outside of Yoshiaki's fortress, at least on one side, and now I'm going to have to work to link up my units from the north and south side of the map in order to begin the final assault on his fortress. I was pretty much assuming at this stage in the game that something suspicious was going to happen once I entered the fortress, since Yoshiaki had supposedly been planning something, and so far nothing particularly exciting had happened to justify all this planning. Nobunaga's in serious trouble here in the level because he gets hit by these 3 enemy ninja units. Ninjas can work through your troops very quickly to the high attack values, and their weakness is that there aren't many of them, so you can defeat their units fairly quickly. But of course, to defeat them I need to be in a good formation and be able to attack them without being constantly staggered by their attacks. So I need to try and surround them preferably. So I'm going to use Kicho here to charge through and take out these 2 enemy units at the back. That's going to give me some time to start doing cycle charges on the rest of them. Anyway, what was I saying? Nobunaga's civil policies, yes. One of the other things he did in Kyoto, which was quite cool, was he removed toll booths. What was going on at the time was that the road system around Kyoto was very dodgy. Basically, there would be toll booths everywhere, controlled by whoever decided they controlled them, who would make people pay for use of the roads, and he abolished those. He made them illegal to exist. Got rid of them. Very good for him. There were lots of bandits in the roads and stuff around the city as well, which Nobunaga helped deal with. With regard to roads, throughout his entire campaign, Nobunaga has been encouraging the building of very big, wide roads with milestones and trees and post stations along them, basically to facilitate trade between castles, because the roads were mainly built between castles. The idea being that towns would spring up around the castles and create these sort of medieval style castle town economies. The additional benefit was that having these big roads meant you could march in formation very quickly between 2 locations. You can see here in the level I'm massacring my own troops with troop skills. It doesn't do any damage, but it's going to reduce my score at the end of the level, which is unfortunate. Sometimes there's not much you can do about that if the AI decides to use troop skills whilst you're standing in the way. You can press a button to block it, which stops you losing any points, but it doesn't always work. Oh well. You can see Nobunaga managed to defeat all those ninjas, Nobunaga's squad, sorry, and the south side. So I need to reassign him some orders. I was going to look around this bottom section for items. I think I do find something. We'll see. Yes, so Nobunaga was a very big road builder, very important. On economic policy in general, Nobunaga was very much for the free market. So apart from the things like banning of monopolies and the regulating of guilds, he left a relatively free market economy system in place, which was a good idea for Japan as it was at the moment, because it was very economically damaged and had it basically had a lot of resources to exploit and was very able to benefit very quickly from free market style economics, especially with the corollary that you couldn't build monopolies and things, which are some of the traditional weaknesses of free markets. Anyway, so we can see I spotted an item back across the river a while ago, so I had to send one squad back to get it. Meanwhile, I picked up an item here as well with Nobunaga, so basically I had to take a quick break from fighting the battle to pick up all these items. I went off with Nobunaga down to the south side looking for anything else and found this health area. That's going to restore his troops to almost full. So now I'm actually in a pretty good condition after that. I was a little bit worried that Nobunaga had taken heavy damage, but now it's okay. So he's going to start walking his way north to take out some of the enemy units there. Meanwhile, I'm going to use Kyoto to heal up Hideyoshi. So by the time they reach the enemy lines, they're going to be in pretty much prime condition. Ideal. Meanwhile, the other squad should be somewhere on the other side of the river, picking up that item. Let's go over and have a look at them. There it is. So now there's only one enemy unit left on the map, so I guess I'm just going to have to converge on that. I was still sure that something was going to happen, some sort of trap, and well, we'll see that Yoshiaki does in fact have something in store. We'll find out what it is. It's slightly less impressive than I thought it was going to be. So while we move up, I want to talk about one more topic, which is something I actually wanted to talk about for a while. It's just a little interesting point, which is that you might think the ideal weapon in a time like this, especially in the pre-firearms era, would be a pristine, well-made samurai sword with a perfectly sharpened blade, able to cut through the heavy armor worn by samurai, and even worn by Ashigaru troops at some points. But in fact, there was a strange thing in this period, Sengoku Jidai, and pretty much all the other classical periods, in which a blade which was in poor condition would be considered a more deadly weapon than a blade in good condition. And what's the reason for this? Well, a blade in poor condition will have a blunt and chipped edge and will be very weak against rusting effects. So iron oxide can form on the edge of blades, and although this makes them less sharp and less effective at cutting through armor, what it does mean is it makes the wounds it gives almost impossible to survive. You can see how I used a very good X-healer ability to restore all the troops of my army except Yoki's at once. One thing about Yoki Kaisen is you'll notice that his name is spelled J-O-K-I when you're looking him at your troop rosters and when you're controlling him. On the left side of the screen right now you can see it's spelled with a U, so there's some sort of strange confusion. I believe it's due to an incorrect romanization or something, or who knows. What was I saying? The rusty blades effect. Before I talk about that anymore, let's have a look at this little event that happens there. We see the castle gates close.
Witness the abilities of the true warrior. You're trapped like the rat you are.
So my samurai have been trapped inside the castle.
Hey, I'm trapped too. Oh no, I can't escape.
Yoshiaki's trapped too though, and my guy's looking pretty serious. So what's happened is it's teleported Nobunaga's unit inside, so now I'm going to have to hunt down Yoshiaki in this little open space. And that was all it was, Yoshiaki's plan. There's nothing more exciting, no ambushes or anything, so I just have to hunt him down and kill him. Not going to be too difficult. Unfortunately, this is when the computer started updating, so we're going to see some pretty serious lag in a moment. Looks like it's just beginning. Anyway, I was saying about rusty blades. Basically, if your blade is rusty and you hit someone with it, there's a good chance you're going to give them tetanus. And with medicine being in the state it was in, people would die from that, whereas you wouldn't necessarily die from a sword slash or a sword wound, especially if it was through armor and not very deep. So people would often brandish rusting weapons in order to instill fear in their enemies, because they would know that if they were hit at all, they were doomed to die at some point, even if they won the individual combat. So that's what I want to say about rusty weapons. It's just an interesting point people don't often think about in classical melee combat. So we can see I used Hideyoshi. I broke him off from the main force to cut off Yoshiaki's escape. on the south side, and the game starts lagging profusely. So I had to stop the recording for a second to try and do something about it, so it might cut strangely in a moment. It's very inconvenient. I really wish I didn't have to play this on an emulator, but I don't have the hardware to record my PlayStation at the moment. You can see Toshie is actually slowly breaking in through the castle gates at the edge while I'm doing this, so even if Yoshiaki manages to keep escaping for a while, eventually I'm going to have 6 units hunting him down, and he's not going to last very long in that scenario. So basically, I now need to bring Nobunaga and Kyoto down to attack Yoshiaki from the rear. Unfortunately, I make a poor move. I charge Hideyoshi through to do some damage, but now Yoshiaki's free to escape, where Hideyoshi had just abandoned that position. So I have to hunt him down again, but I was getting a little bit impatient. So you can see I used the Gale skill. The Gale skill, it makes your unit move slightly faster. I'm thinking I can hunt them down with my move skill increased cavalry. But Yoshiaki does a pretty good job of running away, even against cavalry with increased movement ability. But I eventually catch him up and manage to start doing some damage. And Nobunaga and Kyoto are right behind me, so now we can really finish him off. I'm going to use all my skills on him to take him out. Of course, really, as we saw historically, Yoshiaki surrendered the second Nobunaga broke into his fortress, so there was no crazy closing the gates tactics. If this had been a historical representation, what we would have seen is Nobunaga walking in and the battle ending straight away and it going to the cutscene we're about to see where Yoshiaki begs for mercy. But the game makes us hunt down and kill this one enemy unit just to annoy us really, because it's not a challenge at all, it's just inconvenient. So there we go. The battle is won. Kyoto is ours.
The shogunate is over. It is time we created a new order.
Indeed, the era of the shogunate is over. It's the end of one of the great eras in Japanese history. I believe the new era is called the Tensho era. I think the game mentioned that actually. Let's have a look at my score on the level. I've got a pretty high score. I guess it wasn't so hard a stage. And a whole selection of prizes. So let's have a look at some of the prizes. We got Galatine, some sort of big Zweihander sword for Amalia. Sumiyoshi no Kami War Fan, something for gun troops. Ikan armor, the armor that Fujinaka Ishiki, I think that's his name, was wearing. And a long Ibushi style helmet that's kind of weird, it's very asymmetrical. And a teapot, which makes you better at commanding horse archers, as all teapots do. And a bunch of levels up. A few skill levels up. Hideyoshi and Toshie gaining heal skills, which I'm very happy about. Always good to see heal skills. So let's see what the cutscenes have in order. Still got that annoying glitch at the bottom. We're going to have to ignore that for another episode. Hopefully it'll go away in a future episode.
I've repented of my actions. I won't do it anymore. Please forgive me. I was forced into a shrine when I was young. It was hard. My father and brother died. I thought at least I must restore the shogunate and bring equality to the people. I wish I'd never been born into the family of the shogunate.
A terribly sad story indeed. So this is Yoshiaki begging for mercy, trying to instill pity in himself. Oh, but wait.
Hold.
Will you have him commit seppuku?
Mitsuhide, you are...
You can live out your life quietly. You will never lack for anything. But if you ever cause me trouble again, you'll wish you'd never been born.
That's pretty realistic. Yoshiaki was sent into exile and, well, a ruler's exile. An exile with everything he could ever want. Sent west. Here we go, Chapter 7, the Tensho Offensive. It did mention the Tensho idea. So Tensho is the name of the era in history that begun with Yoshiaki's exile. I can't remember how long it lasted, maybe a couple of 100 years. Let's see what's going on.
The Oda force gained victory over the shogunate forces, and Yoshiaki was driven from the capital. Thus ended the powerful Ashikaga shogunate. Following this, Nobunaga received the title of Tensho from the imperial court.
I'm not sure about that.
And while preparing for battle against the Azai, Asakura, and still powerful Takeda clans, he worked to bring order to the country. He removed the checkpoints, repaired the roads, issued orders, and declared freedom for
So
trade.
there's some of the things I talked about
His
earlier.
determination to overcome old practices brought life back to the region.
I'm not sure about him receiving the title of Tensho from the court. He received the title of Sangi, which is like a court advisor. Maybe they were thinking of that when they wrote that line. I don't know. So, what's going on here?
Just like the throngs of Babylon, yes?
He removed the checks.
Louis
to deliver
Fro's
the
back.
bad guilds. This has helped the town to prosper. Senor is a hero, and he allows us to do our work here.
You are a missionary. I am a woman without a country.
You know, I've just noticed that Amalia is a beautiful woman. She has a different appeal than Kicho.
Damn
now
it,
you're going to
Nobunaga.
start looking at Amalia that way? Go ahead. See if I tell you about Lady Kicho. Lady Kicho and Master Mitsuhide used to be lovers, you know.
Oh, the past.
Guys in the background are
Not
still
interesting.
cheering even though the contest is
The only
over.
thing
They're just
I
going
care
wild.
about is the future.
Oh no, it's not over. That explains it. So Nobunaga doesn't really care that Kicho's having an affair with Mitsuhide, and he himself is interested in getting with Amalia, so the perfect romance they seem to have has pretty much gone.
Let's review our strategy.
Sir!
My lord, this is the latest information on the situation.
So we're going into chapter 7. Let's see what sort of stages chapter 7 has for us. We've got 3 stages again and a minor battle. Akechi Castle, I'm not sure what that is. A Takeda army. There weren't really any battles with the Takeda army, especially in 1573, so I'm not sure what that's about. Over here, looks a bit more familiar. We've got a battle of Odani Castle with the Azai army, and a battle of Echizen against Asakura. That one happened first historically, so I guess I'll do that one. I think I'll do Echizen and Odani if it only gives me the choice of 2, like it usually does. I've got this minor battle, Namazue Brigands. They shouldn't be too hard to deal with. So I guess the next 2 episodes are going to be Echizen and Odani, unless it lets me do all 3, in which case I'll show you Akechi. Because Echizen and Odani represent 2 important battles, the fall of the Asakura and the Azai clans, which basically gave Nobunaga complete dominance over central Japan, and would lead him to face new opponents, such as the Mori, who I often mention, and the Uesugi, the enemy of the Takeda, who we haven't seen yet, but they have a very large clan to the north of the positions we're seeing on the map here. So they're going to make some sort of strong appearance, perhaps in chapter 8, or as the decisive battle of this chapter. We'll find out. I have, of course, played this game before at some point, but only once, and it was many years ago, so I don't really remember what's going on, which is why my performance in the levels isn't completely perfect, but I still seem to be doing pretty well. I think I've got the top rank on all of them so far, so if you've been using this series as a walkthrough, I guess it's been useful. And I am very much appreciative of all the comments people give telling me when I've missed items or missed opportunities to recruit new officers. It's always good to know. I don't know everything about the game, so I am going to miss a few things, so if anyone has any enlightening information, do post it below. So thank you very much for watching this episode of The Legend of Nobunaga. That's the end of chapter 6. I hope you have a very good time, and I'll see you next time, next week in fact, for the Tensho Offensive. Have a good time.